Boa tarde a todos. I'm delighted to address you today on the subject of impact investment at this Brazilian forum, which has been organized in partnership with INSEAD. And I've been asked to give you a sense of my journey here. And I have, in fact, been to Brazil quite recently. I was there last year. I had conversations with a number of people who are interested in impact investment, and I'm delighted to hear that you've set up or are in the process of launching the Brazilian Social Finance Task Force. My journey to impact investment started in 2000 when the British government, the Treasury specifically, asked me to look at the issues of poverty. And some of the things I'm going to say about the UK will resonate with you in Brazil. The government felt that as standards of living were rising, so the gap between rich and poor was increasing instead of reducing. And I was asked to have a look with a more entrepreneurial eye at what could be done about poverty and the social issues that surround it. Michelle Giddins, who is with you today, who is one of the leading lights in the impact investment world, was my right hand on the Social Investment Task Force. And Steve Morrison, who is with you today also with Bridges, was one of my partners in founding Big Society Capital in the UK, which is the impact investment bank funded with £400 million of unclaimed bank accounts and £200 million of bank money. And between Michelle's first work with me and what I was lucky enough to be able to do with Steve in establishing the world's first impact investment bank, a huge amount of ground has been covered. The work of the task force basically threw up an important proposition. And the proposition was that if you look at poor areas, they are basically underserved areas which have been starved of investment. And if you can bring investment back to these areas, not only do you help economically, but you also create role models that become powerful examples for people in these areas to follow in escaping poverty and the social issues that afflict them. But in 2000, the only obvious thing we could do was to do what I had been fortunate enough to do at Apax Partners in funding business entrepreneurs, to do this in funding social entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs who were setting up businesses in the poorer parts of the country and who required equity capital. And it looked like a very big bet in 2000. We went out promising to achieve half a venture capital rate of return, about 10 to 12%. And most people were very skeptical about our ability to do that. But the government put up half of the money in matching finance, providing an incentive to the return of investors by accepting less yield on half of its own investment of £20 million. And we got off to a running start. And today, Bridges manages more than $500 million of capital, has delivered more than 15% net IRR on its venture funds, and even more than that on its property funds. But that in itself was only a first step. We realized that financial innovation was required if we were going to be able to do for social entrepreneurs what we'd done for business entrepreneurs. And the Social Investment Task Force recommended that in order for this financial innovation to take place, we basically needed to create a social investment bank tasked with the job of bringing together both financial and social expertise and to innovate in the way in which we fund social entrepreneurs and their organizations. And the big breakthrough from this work came in 2010 when the first social impact bond came to life. And many of you know about social impact bonds, but in those days none had been launched, and we went to the Ministry of Justice and we said, you have a problem, a similar problem exists in every country in the world. You have a problem which is that 2/3 of prisoners who are released, serving young prisoners serving short sentences, go back to prison within 18 months. And we said to the government, we will raise £5 million. We will fund 3 or 4 not-for-profits who are working with prisoners near a jail of your choosing. They chose Peterborough Prison. And if we fail to reduce the rate of reoffending over several years by 7.5%, then the money will be lost. If, on the other hand, we succeed in reducing it by between 7.5% and 15%, then the government will pay back the £5 million of capital and an increasing yield that will go from 2% to 13%. And the punchline was that government, even at the 13% level, would be paying out between 1/3 and 1/2 of the saving in the first year from not taking these young people through the legal system back into prison. This was a light bulb moment for me, because I realized that connecting a social outcome to a financial return was the key to the capital markets. And with my colleagues at Social Finance, we've worked very hard since then to develop the social impact bond into a powerful instrument, both in developed economies and as development impact bonds in emerging countries, as a powerful way of funding social entrepreneurs and social organizations. Now, why is it so powerful? One of the reasons is that we haven't realized over the past century or more, as we've been engaged in philanthropy, that philanthropy has basically constrained the growth of social organizations. In a way, it's focused on the act of giving rather than achieving social outcomes. As philanthropists, myself included, we have all given money to a charitable service provider and said, here, have money for 1 or 2 or 3 years, and then after that, as a sanity check, go elsewhere. And please, don't spend any money on your overheads. The reason that philanthropists adopted this approach, we can now realize, is that nothing could be measured. You couldn't tell the performance of one charitable service provider from another, not accurately. And philanthropists have been satisfied with rather general reports on the inputs that had been made by these charitable organizations, how many people they'd visited and so on, but not focused on the outcome. What impact investment involves is investment in organizations that have a clear social objective which is continuously measured. These organizations can be for-profit, profit with purpose, as we call them today, or they can follow non-profit models. But in both cases, the achievement of social outcomes is the primary goal of the organization. And the G8 task force, at least the task force established by the G8, should I say, has been working on understanding the forces that are required to get to takeoff for impact investment globally. And the analysis of different countries' ecosystem, as we call it, has been an important part of our work because it has led us to define policy recommendations that are overarching across many countries and that will enable governments, in each case, to build on the areas of strength in their system in tackling social issues. In some countries, like Germany and Japan and France, corporates are very active forces in tackling social issues. In others, like the United States and the UK and Holland, big charitable foundations are major forces. And in all of these countries, there exists a significant social sector which is working between the private sector and the public sector, peopled by persons that are devoting their lives to helping others. And our purpose is really to catalyze investment into this sector and to catalyze investment into entrepreneurs who want to start or to develop profit with purpose companies. Looking ahead, we can already anticipate an impact accounting system which focuses on the cost per successful outcome, which is being incurred by charitable service providers, to the price which a charitable foundation is paying to rehabilitate a prisoner or to prevent a dropout from school from dropping out, or a homeless person from staying on the streets. And we can anticipate the measurement of social returns. That price to which I've referred, which governments, in the case of the UK, are already beginning to post on the net. You can go to the Cabinet Office and you can look at the cost of 600 different social issues and the potential savings arising from solving them. That cost, that price, is a way for us to calculate social returns. If 4,000 prisoners have been rehabilitated and the price that is being paid is $1,000 or euros or reals, then $4 million is the value today of the social performance that has been achieved. And that 4 million can then be related to the value of the social impact bond, which has funded it, which may have been 10 million. So we can then begin to think of instruments like social impact bonds generating a 7% financial return, uncorrelated with equity markets or with interest rates, and generating a similar or higher social return. I believe that impact investment is going to revolutionize the way that we tackle social issues. In the same way that venture capital was a response to the needs of tech entrepreneurs and businesses, impact investment is a response to the needs of organizations that want to tackle social issues. I can see it going beyond the $60 billion of microfinance, along the way to the $3 trillion of venture capital and private equity. I was there at the beginning of venture capital and private equity, and I feel exactly the same way about impact investment as I did then about those new forms of investment. The G8 picked up the subject under the leadership of Prime Minister Cameron. I hope that Brazil and Australia and other countries in the G20 will pick it up in the G20, because it has the potential to transform lives in those countries and lives in emerging countries beyond there. So it's been my great pleasure to address you today. I think we're on the threshold of a revolution, and you are the revolutionaries alongside us. And I hope that when I get to come to Brazil to look at what has been achieved there a few years from now, we will see a thriving impact investment community backing a thriving community of impact entrepreneurs. Thank you very much.